Hey everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about the 5% rule. Have
Okay.
you heard of this?
Yeah, I have actually. It's something that comes up a lot in kind of productivity and self-help circles.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something that I think resonates with a lot of people because it's essentially the idea that you don't need to make these huge, drastic changes to see like big improvements in your life.
Right. Yeah, I think it kind of goes against that whole like New Year's resolution kind of mentality, where you're like, okay, I'm going to change everything all at once.
Exactly. And then you burn out like 2 weeks later.
Exactly.
It's like the 5% rule is like this kind of antidote to that sort of all or nothing thinking.
Totally. It's much more sustainable, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not trying to change like every single aspect of your life overnight.
Yeah, it's about making these like small incremental adjustments. And then over time, like those small changes compound and actually lead to some pretty significant results.
Yeah, like compound interest kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if you think about it, like, if you were to put 5% more effort into something every single day
Right.
over the course of a year, you would actually see a pretty big difference.
Yeah, and even just thinking about like one area of your life,
Hmm.
if you were to just improve by 5%, maybe your fitness routine or your productivity at work, it's like those small gains really add up.
Yeah, and it's like psychologically too, it feels a lot less daunting, right? Like
Absolutely.
like if you're someone who's maybe struggling with procrastination or feeling overwhelmed by like a big goal, it's like the 5% rule kind of breaks it down into these manageable chunks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's much less intimidating.
Exactly. So we've actually got a really interesting YouTube podcast script that kind of lays out this 5% rule and talks about how to apply it to different areas of your life.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'd love to dive into that.
Yeah, so I think our kind of mission today is to really like understand the underlying principles of this 5% rule
Hmm,
and see how we can actually implement it, in a practical way.
that's good.
Cool. So the script starts off by kind of setting the stage, talking about how like our culture is so obsessed with like quick fixes and instant gratification.
Right. Yeah, always looking for that shortcut.
Exactly. And the 5% rule is kind of like the opposite of that. It's like it's about playing the long game and understanding that real lasting change takes time.
Yeah, it's about consistency over intensity.
Yes, exactly. And the script uses this analogy of compound interest, which I think is really helpful. Like if you think about it, like a small amount of money invested consistently over time can actually grow into a significant sum.
Right.
And it's the same with like our habits and our behaviors. Like these small positive actions that we take on a regular basis can really add up to create some pretty remarkable changes.
Yeah, and the script also talks about how like research has shown that small changes are actually more sustainable than big ones.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because when we try to make these radical changes, it kind of overwhelms our brains and we're more likely to give up.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
But with small changes, it's like our brains don't really perceive them as a threat. So we're more likely to stick with them.
Yeah. And it's like you're not relying so much on willpower either, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because willpower is a finite resource.
Right.
So when you're trying to make these like huge changes, you're constantly having to draw on your willpower and eventually you just run out of steam.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the 5% rule kind of plays on that. Like by making the changes so small, it's like they almost become automatic. You don't even have to think about them.
Right. Yeah. It's like you're building these habits that kind of run on autopilot.
Exactly. So one of the key benefits of this 5% rule that the script talked about is that it helps to reduce overwhelm,
Hmm.
when we're faced with like a big goal, whether it's losing weight or writing a book or starting a business.
Oh,
It's like that sheer magnitude of the task can feel completely
well,
paralyzing.
that's where do I even begin?
Exactly. But the 5% rule kind of like breaks down those big, scary goals into these bite-sized pieces.
Right. Yeah. So instead of focusing on the entire mountain, you're just focusing on the next step.
And the script also talks about how like those small wins that we get from making those small changes actually help to build momentum.
Right. Yeah. Because every time we achieve something, even if it's small, it gives us a little boost of motivation.
Exactly. And it's like it creates this positive feedback loop where we're like, oh, okay, I can do
I
this.
see.
I'm making progress. And that encourages us to keep going.
Yeah, it's like a snowball effect.
Yes,
Wow.
exactly. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill. It starts small, but it gathers momentum as it goes.
Right. And it gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah. So let's talk about some specific examples of how we can actually apply this 5% rule, in different areas of our lives.
Okay. Yeah. Let's get practical.
Yeah. So let's start with health and fitness because I think that's one area where a lot of people struggle with like making lasting changes.
Yeah. for sure.
So the 5% rule would suggest that instead of trying to overhaul your entire diet and exercise routine overnight,
Right.
you start by making one small change, like maybe you commit to drinking an extra glass of water every day.
Okay.
Or you add a 10-minute walk to your lunch break.
That's manageable.
Right. And then once that becomes a habit, you add another small change, like maybe you swap out sugary drinks for healthier alternatives.
Right.
Or you start going to the gym once a week.
And the key is to not be too hard on yourself if you miss a day or, you don't quite hit your target.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about progress, not perfection.
Right.
And then the script also talks about applying the 5% rule to our careers and productivity.
Uh-huh.
So maybe instead of trying to completely revamp your work habits,
Hmm.
you focus on one small area that you can improve.
Okay.
Like maybe you commit to spending 5% more time planning your day,
That's a good one.
or you block out 10 minutes every morning to focus on your most important task. Yeah. And I think it's also important to identify those tasks that are really high leverage.
Yeah.
Like the ones that will have the biggest impact on your overall productivity.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
Right.
And then the script also touches on relationships,
Oh, yeah.
which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
So the 5% rule can actually be applied to our interactions with the people we care about.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe instead of trying to have these grand romantic gestures or spend hours on the phone with your friends,
Right.
you focus on making small but consistent efforts to show your love and appreciation.
Okay.
Like maybe you send a thoughtful text message every day, or you make a point of listening attentively when someone is talking to you.
Yeah. And I think those small gestures can actually mean a lot more than those big grand gestures that happen once in a while.
Right, because it's about showing up consistently.
Exactly.
And it's about those little things that really make a difference.
Right. And then finally, the script talks about applying the 5% rule to our mindset and personal development.
Uh-huh.
So this could involve starting a daily gratitude practice or meditating for 5 minutes every morning.
Okay.
Or reading for 10 minutes before bed.
And I think it's important to choose something that you enjoy doing because that will make it more likely that you'll stick with it.
Yes, for sure. And it's those small practices can actually have a big impact on our overall well-being.
Right, yeah, because they help us to cultivate a more positive and resilient mindset.
Exactly. So the script then goes on to share some real-world examples of people who have successfully used the 5% rule to achieve their goals.
Okay, cool. I always love hearing those stories.
Yeah, so one example is James Clear, who's the author of the book Atomic Habits.
Oh, yeah, I love that book.
Yeah, it's a great book, and he talks about how he used the principle of small daily improvements to recover from a serious injury.
Wow.
Yeah, and eventually become a best-selling author.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and it's he emphasizes the importance of consistency and not getting discouraged when you don't see results immediately.
Right, yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. And then the script also tells the story of a woman named Sarah who used the 5% rule to get out of debt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she started by saving just $10 a week,
Okay.
and then she gradually increased her savings over time, and eventually she was able to pay off all of her debt.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's it just shows that even small amounts of money saved consistently can make a big difference.
Yeah, it's the power of compounding again.
Exactly. So the script then acknowledges that applying the 5% rule isn't always easy.
Uh-huh.
There are going to be challenges along the way.
Yeah, for sure.
And one of the biggest challenges is impatience.
Right. We live in a world that's so focused on instant gratification.
Exactly. And it can be hard to stay motivated when we don't see results immediately.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that the 5% rule is a long-term strategy. It's about making small, sustainable changes that will compound over time.
Exactly. And it's not about trying to force things to happen.
Right.
It's about trusting the process and knowing that those small efforts will eventually pay off.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to be flexible.
Mhm.
If you're finding that a particular 5% change is too difficult to maintain,
Uh-huh.
you can always adjust it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not about being rigid.
Right.
It's about finding what works for you and being consistent with it.
Exactly.
So the script ends by kind of reiterating this core message,
Yeah.
which is that personal growth doesn't have to be overwhelming.
Right.
It's not about making these huge, drastic changes that are unsustainable.
Yeah.
It's about making small, consistent efforts that compound over time.
Right.
And the 5% rule is a really simple but effective way to do that.
Totally.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question to think about.
Okay.
What is one small 5% change that you can make in your life today? That could have a significant positive impact in the long run.
It could be anything, right?
It could be anything. It
Yeah.
could be related to your health, your career, your relationships, your personal development,
Yeah.
whatever area of your life you're looking to improve. Just think about one small step that you can take today and then commit to being consistent with it.
And remember, even if it's just 1%, it's still progress.
Exactly. And those small changes over time can really add up to something amazing.
They really can.
So that's it for this deep dive into the 5% rule.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.